we're opening it up as a Zoom meeting. We're doing this because of the pandemic, and it's being controlled by the meeting, and we will have people admitted and et cetera into the meeting. But everybody's free to listen. You'll only be recognized, under the guidelines, when you're recognized by the host of the meeting. And I think Nina's running the, you're going to control the access of people with voices. So the first thing I wanted to do was just notice that we've got 5 members, Mark Beglane, Dan Plotkin, Charles Gray, Brian Hill, and Francis Dean are all here. First item is I want to indicate anybody have any objections? Is the minutes of the December 13th, 2021 meeting? Does anybody have any changes or additions? I've read through it. I was okay with it, but I want to make sure everybody else was okay with it.
Yeah, look good to me.
Any comments or anything on those minutes? We got a motion to approve the minutes as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Right,
So
hold
it's
on.
unanimous. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the continuation of our hearing of the 13th of January, 2000 or 13th of December till tonight. Do we have a notice of the hearing? This is going to be done by Zoom, so people will only be allowed to speak. You're allowed to listen the whole time. We'll do it like we've done before. You'll be admitted into the room by the host of the meeting, Nina Fazio. You'll be allowed to speak. We'll have the proponent speak first and the opponents speak secondly, and then if there's any items that are going to were brought up, we'll allow the proponent to do rebuttal. And I had asked everybody to give their name and address before they address the board. As a matter of item, I'd like to add as exhibits the new documents that were submitted by the petitioner, as I guess exhibits 18, 19, 20. The first would be the alternative site analysis that was given to us by Ellen Fryman with her letter of January 4th, 2022. That would be the next exhibit. The next thing would be the revised zoning drawings dated January 3rd, 2022, that move the tower further to the south so that they won't need a variance from us from the northerly property line. The third is the internal Verizon wireless email correspondence dated September 12th, 2018, September 21, 2018, September 24, 2018, regarding Verizon Wireless's attempts to contact John Burney about siting a proposed wireless facility on his property. The fourth item would be a legal memorandum addressing the ability of the board to consider purported health effects as part of its review of the application. And then the addendum provided by Bennett Franklin, appraisers, dated January 4th, 2022 on their appraisal. The other item I'd like to have brought in as an exhibit is the various studies that we were given in reports that we were given by the abutters of the health impacts. I believe there were 3 or 4 reports, and I'd like to have those admitted as the last exhibit for now. Is that acceptable with everybody?
Yep.
Anybody have any questions?
All right, my end, yes.
Okay. So I think everybody is all set with that. So I had asked to get the meeting started, that the petitioner, is a petitioner present, and is someone prepared to speak?
Petitioner is present. Thank you, Chairman. Ellen Fryman for Verizon Wireless. And
Oh, Ellen,
So-
one thing is a matter of bookkeeping. We should get a request from you if we could, just to, we're getting beyond our, or close to our timeframe for submitting, having a reply on a variance because of the continued hearings. So
mhm.
we had just asked that, the petitioner consent to the decision potentially being rendered, later than 100 days because of the continuances here.
We do consent and we can provide that in writing to you.
Okay, I'd
That
request that if you
as
would.
part of the record. We'll
Yep.
submit that. Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So, so since last time, we did submit a number of items, which I don't know if you
I've
went
read through them.
all through
Yep.
the 5 items that we submitted. And then today we added to the PowerPoint presentation that we had given to provide more detailed information regarding the alternative analysis.
Okay, yeah,
And this, we think this is a really a good example, explanation of how we came to picking the site that we did. Because when you look at all the sites, which in this analysis, it lists the the distance from where this site is relative to our other sites and how this one is just in the sweet spot of where we need the tower to be.
Yep.
Some are just a little too far, some are a little too close. And then looking at all the other criteria that, then this isn't even all the criteria, but some of the criteria relative to the properties, tree removal and wetland issues and screening, height of tower, there's no other site that's as perfect as the one that, I wouldn't say our site is perfect,
Perfect, but
we
yeah.
need the variance, but none is better than what we have. And, even if there was a site that came close to the one that we're proposing, there's still yet a whole other host of criteria that we have to look at, assuming, knowing that we might have landlords that are agreeable to work with us. We still would have to come to business terms with them. We'd have title examination, environmental, NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act that looks at a whole host of environmental impacts, historic, where the tower would be located on the parcel and whether that would be suitable to the proposed possible landlord, and whether we would have other opposition from their neighbors. So there's a lot of unknowns, any other site that we look at, even like I said, even if there was one that came as close to being suitable as the one that we are proposing here. So, so the big thing is we did move the tower even further. So this is the second time we've shifted it so that we've eliminated the need for a variance from the northern border, which is Mr. Bernie's property. So the only variance site, the dimensional variance that we're looking for is from the eastern side, which is a relative of the landlord. So he's, hasn't opposed anything that we're doing. And so, and we've, we're willing to, we've looked at other things that we can do to try to mitigate any impact on the neighbors. And so, we've looked at, painting the tower, and we would be amenable to doing that if the board, and maybe these are planning board issues, but still, I mean, just so you know, we're putting it out there in the public. And we would be amenable to doing some plantings, if additional plantings would be, requested. And also the mounting that we have can be shrunk, can be pushed closer, so that it's, the
Large.
dimensions that aren't as, isn't as wide. So we can move that in a few feet. So if that's, those are the type of things that we're willing to do to make this more, amenable. So we hope that we have, provided you with all the information that you need to make this decision. And again, we've appreciate all the time and input and comments and questions and from everyone, and anything further, that any questions on anything that we submitted, we
Yeah.
have our team here that can address those questions.
Yeah, I didn't know, for the benefit of anybody who might be the public, in terms of the alternate site analysis. I've read through the alternate site analysis that you provided with the January 4th letter and the one we received today, and I'm satisfied. But I don't know if somebody want to just sort of summarize their findings. I mean, it's in the report, but a lot of these people I don't think have seen these documents.
Mhm. Well, I can go through the different columns and different
Yep.
criteria that we looked at for the tower site. And then I can have Kip or Dave talk about from the RF perspective, which is, you know, the distance question.
Yep.
And so the columns that we had were, would we need a taller tower? And in 3 of the sites, we would have to go taller based on elevation. Are there wetlands on the property? And in 5 of the sites, now these are, we boiled this down to, there were 7 other possible locations
sites,
that
right.
we were that
Yep.
were closest to being suitable. That then there's another chart that we submitted, which are the 5 that we ruled out immediately.
Right.
And then, so 5 of the 7 have wetlands, potential crossings that would be necessary, tree screening available. There's 2 of the sites that would be, again, an open field without any benefit of screening. Tree removal, 4 of the sites would require tree removal. More challenging construction, you know, whether we'd have to build bridges or deal with floodplain issues or transmission towers. And 3 of the sites would be more challenging in terms of construction. And then the dimensional setbacks. And one of them we know for sure, another one we aren't sure. You know, some of these are depending where they would go on the site and where the landlord would be, you know, property owner would be allow the tower to be located. So and so every one of these sites has at least one of these challenging criteria that would help, you know, make it not as suitable as where we are. And then Kip, if you want to just talk about or Jay, whoever wants to talk about the other chart.
Yeah, good evening. Can I just confirm that someone can hear me?
We
We can
can.
hear you.
Yep, good evening, Jay Latore with Verizon, 122 Forest Hills Road in Springfield, Massachusetts. So Attorney Fryman is referring to slide 12 in the deck that we shared, and it's essentially the same format. The leftmost column are the 7 different parcels that we looked at, with the 8th row being the subject parcel for which we are seeking a variance from your board this evening. And what we've tried to do with this chart is to give the board and the audience, the public, a little better understanding of some of the design constraints and considerations we have when we look at parcels. Attorney Fryman has already given you all the different land use considerations that come with siting a wireless communications facility, of which I'm sure many on the board are very familiar with. But ultimately, even if we found a parcel that met all of those requirements, if it doesn't meet the needs of the wireless communications network, it's ultimately not a viable site. And so, you know, sometimes when we come into these meetings, there's a desire to say, you know, can't we just put it here? Can't we just put it as far away as possible? Doesn't this site seem more appropriate? And we have to bring people back to be reminded that at the end of the day, it's all about finding a location that can provide the right strength and capacity of service where our customers are going to use it in their homes, in our schools, along main roads, at businesses, which may be in their homes or farms or even development that doesn't even exist yet. It's all something we have to take into consideration. And we look at it within the context of where our existing facilities are. And in this instance, as we've gone over in previous hearings, We have 2 existing facilities in Hamden, very close to the Hamden-East Long Meadow border, and another facility in East Long Meadow on the town municipal water tanks that form, if you will, a triangle. And what we're really trying to do at the end of the day is to find, and what we brought to you is a parcel where we hope to build a communication system that fits nicely in the center of that triangle. So it's not a perfect triangle, but if you look at this chart 12, or page 12, excuse me, and you look at that bottom row, you look and see that, you know, our proposal is relatively equidistant to the 3 adjacent existing sites. And what that does is it allows Verizon's engineers to come up with a design that best ensures that we provide some meaningful offload to the existing facilities, meaning we take traffic that is currently being processed by one facility and we move it on to this facility. We make sure that the facilities are close enough to one another that as a vehicle or someone walking up and down the street moves from facility to facility, that there's enough overlap for them to communicate with one another. And finally, that there's enough separation between them that A, there isn't so much overlapping coverage as to create interference, and B, that the level of overlap between them isn't so significant as to render the overall improvement in service, you know, relatively minimal. As been said before in these meetings, we're here tonight ready to make a substantial investment because we have a high degree of confidence that looking at all the different variables, that this investment is going to have a substantially improved impact on Verizon's experience for our customers in East Long Meadow. That's why we're here. So, you know, this chart really, and as Attorney Fryman mentioned, it, you know, all of these parcels are of different sizes and have different topographies. So some of these numbers, particularly the elevation changes, you know, could be different if we were looking at a different spot on an individual parcel. But as you can see, it's a relatively flat area. There's not too many instances where there's a dramatic change in grade. You notice that in, it would be column number 6 where it says elevation change. And then when you see columns 3, 4, and 5, you'll see those are distance measurements from the 3 existing towers. And what it comes down to is that when you have 3 existing facilities that are all, if you drew a circle within 2 miles of one another, ultimately what you have is the need to really, for a lack of better words, thread the needle very carefully. We can't be too far in any one direction, or else we're going to end up with a facility that on one side has a lot of overlap with an adjacent facility, which means customers in this area are really not going to have any sort of meaningful improvement in this experience. And on the other side, have a large gap in between our facilities, you know, so that the customers that are currently on an existing facility similarly don't see any sort of meaningful impact because the new facility just can't get to it. So it's this chart is meant to highlight, you know, some of the facilities where we felt strictly from an RF perspective that although they may meet different requirements from a land use perspective, you know, they're simply either too close to an existing facility or too far from an existing facility to produce the type of coverage and capacity improvements, you know, that the network needs in this area.
Any questions? Okay. Ellen, do you want to address the revised plan that you've submitted?
Yeah, we can put that up. We can show you where we've shifted the tower
Yeah.
to. Okay, so now we have the 250 feet from the northern property boundary and basically just shifted it further south. So we made sure it doesn't affect the easement area or anything else on the site. So we made it work.
Okay. And what's the distance from the easterly sideline now?
That hasn't changed, so it's still the
Okay.
100 feet.
Okay, okay,
We did just shift it south.
okay. Because I wasn't sure because of the lines, they didn't
Mhm.
look to be exactly parallel when you moved it, whether that moved it closer, because
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not 100% sure
Mhm.
that because the lines aren't parallel, that you may have shortened the distance a little bit, that's all.
no, we did not
Okay,
move it closer to the eastern boundary line.
okay, that was my only concern that I had,
Mhm.
because the two lines don't appear to be parallel to each other, so that, there's going to be a little bit of a
Yeah.
of a change there. And the other question I had was in looking at, it looks to me that the closest home is the existing residence that's on the property that's being
That's correct.
rented.
That's
And that looks to be about 500 feet away from the edge of the compound to
Yes.
the rear of the home.
Yes, that's correct. And the other thing I'll just point out again, that when we're talking about the 100 feet from the boundary line, we're talking about the outside edge
Edge
of
of
the
the
compound. We're
compound.
not talking about the tower, which is further to the west
Correct.
and south. So,
I understand. And the tower, I mean, one of the plans seems to show it in the center of the thing, but the other one shows it more to the southwest side. I assume the
That's
one to the
correct.
southwest
Yeah.
is the more accurate of the
Yes.
plans.
It can be misleading because there's there's a square around the
Yeah.
tower, but the square is within another
the
square, which is the
square, yeah.
compound. So the compound itself is, the tower itself is in the southwest corner of the compound.
Compound. Yep. That's I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
that's how I understood that.
Right.
And then, do you want to explain the change that was made in the appraisal?
We just had them, we asked them to go back and look at properties where we could determine what the value of what a house was valued at pre-tower construction, and then after it was built, what happened to the value of that property after it was built, and there's no evidence of any decrease in value of the houses that they highlighted in the report.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then I guess you also submitted, if you want to summarize the memorandum of law with regard to the consideration of health impacts.
Right, under the Telecommunications Act, a municipality is precluded from using health effects or perceived health effects as a criteria for denying a tower, and the town can look to compliance with the FAA, with the FCC, which is what we've submitted on the report, showing what are under the worst scenario that we would still be well below what the limits are that are allowed. But so it just cited some cases and summarized the law as far as you can listen to comments, and you can again require us to provide evidence that we're going to comply, which we did. But if there's concern or just conjecture out there, it can't be a basis for denying the approval of the tower.
And I think those are the concerns we had. Am I missing anything of the new stuff that's been submitted by Verizon?
The additional item we submitted was just some internal.
Oh, the
emails.
emails that you had for Bernie,
Mhm.
yeah.
Right.
That I was satisfied, at least attempts were made. Doesn't look like they were successful, and I'm not so sure that site would, even if they had been successful, would have been appropriate or not.
Right.
Any questions from the board?
Looks
No,
pretty,
everything looks good.
it looks pretty straightforward. I was going to mention, but I think Ellen and I think Jay headed me off at the past. In my experience in the real estate world, dealing with telecommunications facilities, they typically stress operational efficacy of a site. I don't know of the only sites I've ever heard of where a financial consideration obviated a certain site is, you know, somebody who just had a ridiculous notion of what their site was worth. But 98% of the time when telecommunications operators seek a cell site, in my experience in the business I'm in, it's all has to do with its ability to function technically as a site, and then approvability, you know, then the entitlement process. And the last consideration, I think, is you know, their ability to negotiate with a landowner in terms of economics. So that was it. I'm satisfied that Verizon has presented that they've done everything they're supposed to do in making this application. I'm satisfied that it's the best site in the town for what they want to do. I'm satisfied that the reasons that they've cited are make sense to me, and I think we should approve it.
Okay. I just want to give the chance, any other people to speak in favor of this? Has anybody indicated? If you do, contact the host, Nina?
Yeah, raise your Zoom hand, but I
Yep.
don't believe there's anybody in favor.
Okay, then I want to hear from anybody who's opposed.
Attorney Stratton.
Attorney Stratton, if you want to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you everyone from indulging me for a second time. Again, my name is Seth Stratton. My business address is 46 Center Square here in East Long Meadow, home address for Webster Lane in Wilbraham, Massachusetts. I'm here on behalf of my clients, Mr. Burney and Ms. Normandin. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard again. I want to thank the board for this has been very deliberative. I wasn't at the first meeting, but this is your third substantive meeting on this, and so appreciate the effort the board is putting forth. I also appreciate I've had the pleasure of working with Attorney Fenton and Attorney Fryman in the past, and they continue to be more than helpful in addressing our concerns, and appreciate the additional accommodations in terms of the moving the tower back further, and some of the camouflaging, landscaping, and other measures proposed today. All of that said, and I'll try to confine my comments to the additional documents, and I will attempt to be brief. My job here on behalf of my clients is really to raise what remain to be fundamental legal concerns with the approach here. And I'll start with the three additional documents. The relocated tower, we appreciate the move south, but there's really no analysis with that move south on the impact to the neighbors to the south. No additional balloon float, no analysis on the visual impact, and I'll come back to that because I think it's consistent with all three of the documents. The emails that you mentioned with Mr. Burney are referencing Mr. Burney. If I'm reading those correctly, I believe it appears that Mr. Burney's original site was originally the target site, was the optimal site. And this is not the blueberry farm across the street, but his property adjacent to the subject property.
To the north.
And that there was a determination due to the apparent inability to get in touch with him that it would move over to the adjacent property, which is currently being proposed. So I think, Mark, your question earlier, you have no idea if that property would have been appropriate. My read of it is that it's perfectly appropriate and was the original target. Mr. Bernie wouldn't have agreed to it for the very same reasons that he's opposed to the project at the current site, is that he doesn't believe it complies with the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance. But what is clear is that 4 years ago, effectively the same spot that's being proposed now within a few hundred feet is what was being proposed then. And the additional presentations, the third document added in today, provides additional detail. It conspicuously omits Mr. Bernie's property. I'm not sure exactly why, perhaps because it was already, he wasn't reachable the first time, but that property, I believe, based on the email chain, would be an appropriate property, very similarly situated to subject property. Again, he wouldn't agree to it, so it's somewhat moot. But I think that what I'm getting at with all three is that Verizon decided almost 4 years ago where they wanted to put this, what is the optimal site for them and their business, and they haven't veered from that at all. No matter what analysis and information required, it all just backstops the original conclusion that, to Attorney Fryman's point, this is the sweet spot. There's no other spot as perfect, and none is better in the town of Visong Meadow. So everything they have presented just establishes that that is the best spot for them. I think, respectfully, Mr. Plotkin, you raised that and said that you're convinced that it's the best spot for them. I'm convinced of that too, but that's not the standard before the board. The standard before the board is what's best for the town and what's most consistent with the zoning ordinance, as qualified by the Telecommunications Act. And if you look at the Telecommunications Act, and I'm not as familiar as Attorney Fryman or Attorney Fenton with the Telecommunications Act, but I've read it a couple of times, the relevant section, and I just want to read two sentences that are, I believe, the operative provisions, and Attorney Fryman can correct me if I'm wrong. Except as provided in this paragraph, nothing in this act shall limit or affect the authority of state or local government or instrumentality thereof over decisions regarding the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless service facilities. It then covers the limitations, and the limitation at issue here is the limitation is provided, however, it shall not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provision of personal wireless services. I've heard nothing in either meeting suggesting that any of the alternative sites would prohibit the provision of personal wireless services. I think a fair question for Verizon is, would any of these other sites work? We know that they're not the best spot. We know they're not the sweet spot, but would one of them work and not prohibit the provision of personal wireless services? Because if they would, and if they're more consistent with the express requirements of the zoning ordinance to preserve the character of the community, then there's nothing prohibiting this board from refusing to grant a variance where it hasn't been shown that the location, which would still allow for the provision of wireless services, comports with the intent of the zoning bylaw. And so that is our fundamental concern, is that this site, while optimal for Verizon, is not optimal for the town. And there are other sites that could work that are less optimal for Verizon, but better for the town and more consistent with the zoning requirements in a residential district. And so I'd urge the board
Can I ask you a question? Seth, you make a distinction between what's good for Verizon and what's good for the town. Do you believe that the people in the town who use Verizon's facilities, their interests and Verizon's are not aligned when it comes to service quality, and that somehow we should move this facility or cause this facility to be approved on a site that is technically less optimum for Verizon, would more than likely result in a degradation of service over what we would expect if it were to go where it's been proposed, based on a relatively cogent explanation by the wireless engineer?
Short answer is yes. I don't believe the wireless coverage and the quality of that coverage is covered under the zoning bylaw and within the purview of the ZBA. The character of the community, the scenic resources, the property values, et cetera, are. And so while there are many in the community who may benefit from and prefer optimal service, I don't believe that's a consideration that should be weighed as opposed to the express consideration set forth in the zoning bylaw to be considered when granting a variance.
Yeah, the only concern I have, Seth, is I'm not sure there are other parcels in the town of East Long Meadow that are going to meet the width and depth requirements to be able to be twice the size of the tower from the compound. I mean, that's one of the problems with this site is you need to have over 500 feet in width of the parcel. You know, and that this parcel just doesn't have that width to be able to be sited. And I'm not sure there are a lot of sites in town where the service could be done that we wouldn't be looking at a similar situation here where we would be looking to get a variance from either a side, a rear, front yard, et cetera, and also try to keep it as far away from existing. I mean, the closest residential home that I see at this proposal is the house that's on the site, and that's 500 feet away from the compound. The other ones, the next closest home is well over 700 feet away from the compound. And so that's the only, I understand where you're coming from, but it's hard for us to do an analysis saying that other sites are going to be better because we just haven't been presented anything. And I can't say that those other sites wouldn't need similar variances for those sites.
Mark, I would argue that that's not even the zoning board's role. Our role is not to decide
No, that's what I'm saying.
what site is better. Our role is to
Right.
decide whether or not a petitioner has met the criteria for the relief that they've requested.
Right.
That's
No,
it.
and that's what I'm
We're
saying.
not supposed to. We're not supposed to decide. You know, it's
Right.
better over here. We may not affect these people as much. Do we have any other people that are in opposition? Are Mr. Stratton's clients the only people who object to the siting of this tower?
Well, there are other people who've submitted objections regarding health concerns and have submitted the reports that I've read. I'm not overly convinced on those reports. Those reports are more dealing with people in the proximity of cell phones to your head on a regular basis. And when they did talk about closeness to towers, they were talking about impacts that were like 50 or 80 meters. The closest home, I mean, this isn't like we're in New York City and they're putting a tower on top of a building that has hundreds of thousands of people in it that could be adversely impacted. Here, where, you know, as I said, the closest home is 500 feet,
Well,
which is
I get it. And no matter where Verizon proposes this in this town or probably in any other town, you're going to have opposition. And I understand that too.
Right.
I don't have a cell phone tower in my backyard, and I wouldn't want one there. So I understand all that. But we also know that there are statutes that support Verizon's right to have these facilities, and we're only permitted to
right. I mean, our only
make
concern
decisions.
here is,
So all I'm saying is I'm just urging this board to sort of, you know, let's give Mr. Stratton as much time as he needs to make his case. Let's see some evidence. If there's going to be a diminution of value of his client's property, I'd like to see that. I'm not convinced that this board has not done everything it's supposed to do with respect to this case. It's our third hearing on this. I don't, unless there are other people in this hearing tonight that want to speak against it, I think we've heard.
Is Mr. Stratton, if you want to address, I was just concerned because I don't think, you know, we're only presented, we can only act on what's presented before us. And that's the petition we have, and to seek the variance basically, I think you're looking for 150 feet from the requirement for setback on the easterly sideline. That's the only variance
Yeah.
they're looking for here. And that's a concern that we have to address ourselves with, and whether they meet the criteria for that variance.
No, well, I'm actually, the setback one is not the issue. It's the variance for having a wireless facility in a
Facility at all.
residential district.
Right.
And I think respectfully, we have presented at least one property because Mr. Bernie doesn't have access to the level of information that Verizon does, but he owns another piece of property that would accommodate a number of these issues. This is not because he wants Verizon to put a tower on that property. It's because it's an example of a property that would address all of those issues, the distance from a home, foliage and cover. But what we've heard, and it's in the presentation by Verizon, what we've heard from Verizon is, well, it's not as good as, it's not the almost perfect. It's that it's not ideal for them. And respectfully, and I guess, and I won't say it again, but respectfully, that's not the question. This is the last time I'll say it. That's not the question before the board. The question is not what's ideal for Verizon. It's whether it's appropriate to give a variance from the zoning ordinance that restricts wireless facilities from being in a residential district unless the interests of the zoning ordinance are otherwise protected. And there's nothing prohibiting this board from
It's a use variance. and I
denying
understand
that request here and approving it somewhere else in the residential district that's more appropriate.
Right.
That would not, in my view, be inconsistent with the Telecommunications Act. And so
Yeah.
that's.
I'm
the
just not
request.
sure there is a more appropriate site or there isn't a more appropriate site, Seth. In terms of my understanding on the Bernie site was one of the things that they cited was their power lines that they're going to impact the the quality of the signal that's coming out of there and require either a smaller tower or a much larger tower, which will create bigger problems because the higher the tower, it's got to be double the tower's height, the setback requirements. So that makes it even more difficult, but it also interferes with the power lines, and the electrical things on high power do impact the signal quality. So I'm not so sure that site is better or not better. I don't have enough evidence to say it is or isn't before me. And that was a concern I have. But we also know that we have in the past turned down a use variance and were overturned by the courts based on the statute.
But that isn't why I'm inclined to approve this. That just means that the board does use its discretion as it should. Mr. Stratton has tried hard and done a good job trying to ask us or to reconsider because his client doesn't like the tower being close to his home. Okay. And so we've heard from him, and I think it's now time to move on.
But I just want to hear if there's any other people who are here tonight that have opposition and different from than what's been said in the past. If not, then I'll give the petitioner a chance to rebut Mr. Stratton, and then we can potentially close a public hearing. Is there anybody else if you want to? Yep.
John Bernie's got his hand up.
Okay. John?
He's on his way.
So Mark, after this, I have a few comments about a few different areas in this subject, just to
Okay.
type it up.
Yep. Mr. Bernie?
Yes, hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Plotkin's comment. It has nothing to do with the tower being in the vicinity of my home. My objection to the tower is you don't put a tower in a piece of open agricultural land when you're in a rural part of town and you have much better places where you could disguise the tower. My the original subject, my property on the west side of Parker Street was the original property that was deemed by Verizon to be the best, the priority property there. And I wouldn't want the tower there for the same reason that I don't want it on the subject property. Has nothing to do with the proximity to my house. The idea is you don't put a cell tower in the middle of a piece of agricultural ground where there's no natural camouflage for the tower and it sticks out like a sore thumb. That's my objection. I think this is a rural area town. There's many places where you could tuck this tower in where it would be barely visible. A good example would be
John,
on the west side of 83.
As a fellow taxpayer, John, I just want you to know, I agree with you. I agree with you that nothing like that should be put on agricultural land or open land in a perfect world. But we're not in a perfect world anymore, unfortunately. And the nature of cell communications is that where towers are in relation to other towers and other natural barriers has a direct effect on whether or not they work, and whether or not the companies that deploy them will spend the money to put them, where they need to be put. So it's sort of like that horse is out of the barn. I wanted you to know that in spirit, I agree with you. I am not in favor of solar fields or cell phone towers or anything else in residential land other than residential buildings. But that's I'm an older guy, and that's the way it used to be. It's not like that anymore. And I think we all need to sort of come to grips with the fact that if we're going to communicate the way the world is telling us we have to communicate now, we're going to have to do it with cell phone towers. And they're going to end up in places we don't like them.
Well, I understand that there's a need for a tower in this area of town, but where does it have to be? And I think a fair resolution would be not to have Verizon's engineers say which property works and which property doesn't, because that's very self-serving. Of course, they're going to say the subject property that they've invested time and money in is most appropriate. Have an independent engineer look at it, look at the alternative properties and say, does this fit the bill? Does this work for Verizon? That seems like a reasonable solution to the problem.
Yeah, I'm not so sure we can have a total independent engineer go around and try to do a full study. It looks like this study is evolved over a 3 or 4 year period. And to have an engineer do this would be, I got to imagine, would take forever, would be expensive as hell, but would also take forever. And I'm not sure was within our purview to basically say, you pick a better site, if you can. And there are so many factors that go in. I'm not sure what would be better or not better. I don't know. It's just hard to say, because it needs to be to improve the service in this area, but it also needs to, it can't just be anywhere in town. So, and as I said, my concern is in the future that we're coming up with the 5G and probably the 6G, the area of coverage of these towers is becoming less and less because of the frequencies that you're dealing with. And what I'm concerned in the future is, as we advance, that we will have a proliferation of towers, because if you're at 6, 7G or 8G, God knows where we'll be 10, 20, 30 years from now. What will be the ranges of those to get adequate service for the people who are using those? And will we have, instead of one tower in an area like this, end up with maybe 5 or 6 towers in order to meet the service demands going forward? We just don't know that. So that's a concern that I do have going forward in the future, how to address the apparent shrinkage of coverage as you go up. You create a faster service in terms of what's there, that the area becomes less and less as you go from, at least it seems to me from a scientific point of view, that as you go up, the area that's covered gets less. And this is only 5G, and, we've gone from what, 1G, not even a G initially when these things were set up, to 5G, and God knows where we'll be in 10, 15 years.
Mark, I'd make a motion that we close the public hearing if there are no other.
Well, I want to
members
give
of the
Ellen a
public that
chance
wish
to rebut what was said by Mr. Stratton, and then potentially, I assume there's nobody else that wants to speak. Mr. Mackey, in opposition?
I do not see any hands, Mark.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up for Ellen for a chance to rebut.
I'll be brief. Just that, I mean, we did look at when you mentioned about that we're not concerned about the land use, about the town, and, looking just towards Verizon service. I mean, we did look, and that's why we created that additional analysis, looking at tree removal, wetland impacts, the other conditions of visual impact. So those are the things that we did look at and analyzed, and said that those sites weren't as suitable because of those that criteria that would have an impact on the property itself. So and the Telecommunications Act does, even though it provides that the municipality can control where it goes and the impacts, but at the same time can't preclude service. And I was going to say what you said, and that this is what happened previously, is it went to court, and then the town loses the ability to provide any kind of conditions, and, to lose the ability to, take advantage of the things that we're willing to offer for mitigation. So, but we do have the town's concerns, we do look at impacts, and we are concerned about that.
Ryan, you had some comments, Ryan?
So just kind of summarizing a number of things. So one of the things is going to those health articles that were sent. I don't find full value in those because the numbers that were used to research weren't, I think, applicable. As far as location goes, I mean, our board is a task for a hardship, whether it's topography, shape of the land, financial, et cetera. If you look at, now we're looking at communications and the impact of people, services, whether it be emergency services, et cetera, using these services does have to be considered in this scenario. If you look at the Squire Farm, as far as an alternative, as far as we look at other sources, they have a wetlands. So that brings into question, is there additional variances that would have to be discussed there involving conservation, et cetera. So I think everything that Verizon has put forward in light of concerns for what's in just their best interest, but also the interest of the citizens, which I think all needs to be put into one bundle. I think they've satisfied and in agreement with everybody else on the board so far. Dan has put a lot of forethought into this with his history and knowledge of construction, et cetera. And I think that Dan has a lot of good points, and I think he has some home values that he's expressed, but in the end, we have to look at the very fine points of this.
Any other comments from board members before we entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
No.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
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 Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so it looks to be unanimous in terms of what's there to the hearing. So now we're at the point of, do we want to do further discussion among the board tonight? Do we want to vote tonight? Give us time to think and put together, because we're going to have to write up a decision one way or the other. And whether we want to do a motion.
After 3 hearings, I would think that this petitioner is owed a decision.
Right,
Yeah,
right. No,
I think we should
Tonight.
vote tonight. That's what I
Okay.
think, Dan. And I think we should deal with this and be done.
Okay, no, that's what I want. So then we've closed the public hearing. Do I have a motion? Because there's a bunch of conditions I would like to see if we're going to be putting on One, we've got two variances we're voting on. First is the use variance to allow a cell phone tower in a residential zone under the exception under the Federal Telecommunications Act to allow a cell tower to be located on this particular parcel, which is in a residential zone in the town of East Long Meadow. That's number one. And then number two is a variance for the easterly sideline of 150 feet variance that would be required for the easterly sideline. Those are the two there. I would like to see some conditions that obviously the latest plan that was submitted today would be the plan that it would be built according to those plans that would have been submitted. Number two, that the tower be built with a fall line that would, in bad storms, would have it fall to the west, southwest of the site. Number three would be that the tower, whether we want additional screening for the fencing and stuff of the tower, or whether we wanted to have it.
Mark, why would that be a consideration of a zoning board?
Because
Screening.
we're allowing it closer to a sideline.
No, I
But we
understand
haven't heard
that.
any opposition. I'm just saying those are considerations. I'm not saying
Right. Well,
that
I'm
we're
just,
looking to
I'm
do that.
responding to your, I'm responding to it.
yeah,
And what
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
suggesting
that
to
would
you
be
is that
if obviously
That's
if you were
Mark,
the easterly abutter.
what I'm suggesting is that those kinds of considerations are for planning board. And I understand planning board's involved here. Let them get involved with shrubbery and screening. I get really nervous when zoning boards start doing, even contemplating or discussing things that really aren't, in my view, in their purview. And that's not in our purview. Painting the tower, that's not in our purview.
I'm not saying.
And I know, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to make a point. You know,
Yeah.
you know how I am. I talk a
Yeah.
lot. So I'm just saying, let's just keep it land use. Let the
Right.
planning board deal with shrubbery and screening. I don't think that should be one of our conditions. I think your other ones are fine.
Right. I mean, in terms of what's there, and I'm not sure there are any other conditions people would want to place on this tower, other than they follow the plans. And there was one issue I do want to make sure that there's compliance with, and it has nothing to do with this, the town's right of first refusal here under the agricultural. It really has nothing to do with our permit, but
Well, all we need to do is acknowledge that there is a right of first.
right, there's a
refusal.
right of first refusal in the town.
Again, that really isn't a zoning board issue. That's
No, that's what I'm saying. It isn't, but I just want them to be aware, because we could grant this and then the town could defeat the whole thing by basically exercising the right of first refusal in buying this land.
In which case we would have wasted 3 hearings and a lot of time.
That's the concern that I had. That's all. Is there any person have any other conditions or things that they would consider?
The other thing I would say, and they already, Verizon already alluded to it, as far as vegetation coverage, painting the tower. Other towers and you see along the highway have the fake branches that make it look like a tree. So I think if they're willing to do stuff, maybe just ask them for that. But I agree with Dan that we can't be maybe stipulating certain things like break points, fall points, because we don't have that expertise. But that's my only input there.
Yeah, I think the fall point is important, because I think part of the reason they had the setback requirements was the safety and where the tower potentially could fall. And I wanted it to have it fall in an area that will have the least impact, on any abutters or anybody. That I think is important.
I thought I heard in one of the earlier hearings, and I don't think we discussed it today, was that it was a self-imploding design.
No,
It's just the weak point in the structure, so that it falls over on the weak side.
weak side. So the weak side would be to the southwest is what I would require, because that's the area that's furthest away from the boundary lines in question, so that it wouldn't fall north and wouldn't fall east. it would fall toward the west, where it would well land within the property and still be away from the home and stuff that's on the property, so that it'd have the least impact on property that, properties or the value, or going on anybody else's property, and impact on the neighborhood. So, but I just wanted to make sure that if there are any other conditions that anybody had, those are the only ones I could think of, but that isn't exhausted.
No, I think we're in good shape there.
Okay, do we have a motion by anybody one way or the
I
other?
will make, I don't know how many motions you can make at once, but I'll make the first motion. If somebody wants a second, make the second, somebody else can make the second motion.
Okay, the first
What
motion to
I would be
approve.
doing is I'd be making the motion as articulated by Chair Mark Beglane, who did it eloquently, and I don't even want to try to recite it, but I assume that that's been recorded, that Nina's recorded that, and we can turn that into a written motion.
Do we have a second on that motion?
I second.
Okay, we'll take
Hold on, just so I'm clear what we're voting on.
Okay,
This is the first one that allows.
the first one will be allow, because there's two variances, so that we're going to vote first on the use variance to allow the erection of a cell tower in a residential zone as a use exception required under the Federal Telecommunications Act. And is this the appropriate site for such a use restriction?
And does that include your
Well,
constraints?
all of them would be required if it's granted that it be built with the proper breakpoint to fall to the south and east, and it be built in accordance with the latest plans that were submitted on I think January 4th, showing the location of the tower 250 feet to the south in the location that it was in, with the tower, matching up with what the plans that they gave us, with the access road and things that are all shown on that plan.
And to include, obviously, the, trying to provide as much coverage and, hiding it as possible.
Yeah, I mean, 125 feet is going to show to a certain extent for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. But
Yeah.
if they can paint it and do those things, it's
Well, that I think we'd leave to the planning board. I don't personally have a problem with, I assume it's going to be sort of a metal steel pipe. I don't know what color it's going to be. That wasn't real clear in the.
I agree.
could care,
I hope
yeah.
I hope the planning board wants them to shield it and works with them to shield it in a reasonable way. It's just not our place to get involved with that.
No, I
That's my
understand.
only point. It's not that I object to it. I don't,
Yeah, no, I understand. But it would be on both variances, those conditions that we're getting. So the first variance, we have basically a motion to allow the use in a residential zone under the Federal Telecommunications Act, subject to being with a fall point being built in accordance with making the weak point so it falls to the south, southwest, and then providing that it's built in accordance with all the plans that have been submitted to the board. So we've had a motion and second on that. We'll now take votes, and I'll do a roll call vote. Francis, I'll start with you.
In favor.
Brian?
in favor.
Charles? He's in favor.
Yes.
Dan?
in favor.
And I'm in favor. Now, as to the second variance, which would be 150-foot variance, they're required to be 250 feet away from the easterly sideline. They are only 100 feet away from the easterly sideline in terms of what's there. In this particular one, this is our typical. We would have to not only find, and I would put in the motions those same conditions I put, but that it is in the public good in terms of providing service, for the public, for emergencies, for computers, for phone service, for better service for our area of the town in terms of the public good. I believe one of the hardships is related to just the width of the land. It just isn't wide enough in this particular parcel that you could possibly site that parcel because it's only 500 feet wide. So you need 250 feet from a 50-foot wide parcel. You would end up going over into another parcel one way or the other. So I think the hardship is just the current shape of the parcel on the width side. So I believe there's a hardship related just to the shape of the parcel in question.
We need
Those
a
would be
second to that motion.
we would need a second on that motion.
Second.
Okay, we'll do a vote. Once again, we'll start with Francis,
In favor.
Brian,
I'm in favor.
Charles,
Aye, in favor.
Dan,
In favor.
and I'll make it unanimous. So we have granted the variance tonight. It won't be effective until we write up the opinion. Unfortunately, we don't have staff because the planning director between our last meeting and this meeting has resigned, who is the person who usually prepares the decision. So I'm going to have to write up the decision with the conditions, et cetera. And I don't know how quickly that's going to happen. Ellen, I'm going to do my
We
best
can
to
offer
try
to
to get
help
it out.
if that's, we can offer to help if that's,
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do a draft, the decision based on what you have, that might be a little bit of help. And
we
I'll
can-
read through it and try to
we do
draft.
that often and I'm happy
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah,
so.
we.
And I do it for the ZBA that I'm on too. So.
No, I understand. So that would be helpful, and I'll volunteer as the chairperson to write it, the
This
decision.
isn't
run it by
like
the board.
Boeing engineers also being FAA inspectors like I read about in the Wall Street Journal.
Well, I'll ultimately make the decision
Yeah, but
whether
we
to
do it a
incorporate
lot.
that or not.
I know, I'm
Yeah,
just kidding. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, Mark will make sure it's right.
Yeah.
so.
When you go to court and you prepare the order for the judge.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, guys.
Well, thank you. But we have one more item that
Mhm.
we have to deal with is the annual report. Have you guys had a chance to review the annual
Just
report?
thank you
for
very
last
much,
year?
everybody. We
Okay.
really
Thank you.
appreciate all the
Thank
time
you,
and
guys.
effort.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, Ellen.
and I appreciate the public's input. Thank you,
Sure.
guys. Everybody did a good job.
Thanks.
Is this still a public meeting? Are we still being
Yeah, it's
recorded?
still a public meeting. It's not it's an open meeting, open to the public. It's not a hearing.
Okay.
It's just a public meeting. We have to just approve the annual report. Did everybody look at the annual report for 2000? Basically is, should we be increasing our fees? These are the reports that we have. You know, those are the concerns. I'm satisfied with the report. Does anybody have any questions on that?
No, I looked it over, Mark, too, and I didn't see anything that stood out. There was an issue.
Yeah, the only concern that I have, and I don't think it goes, do we currently charge Nina? I think we charge a flat fee, but then whatever the publication, whatever costs us for publication gets billed to the petitioner?
Correct. It's a $95 filing fee, and then legal notice is billed directly to the applicant by the
Yeah,
reminder.
because those fees have been going crazy over the last 4 or 5 years, as long as the town is not taking a hit. But I guess the other question I have is, are the registered mail fees remaining the same, or do we also bill them at the certified mail fees, or is that part of the $95 fee?
Certified mail is from our accounts, but rarely anything does get mailed certified mail. They provide their own stamped envelopes for abutters notices and all that stuff. So we rarely send anything with postage from our account.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure, in terms of our application fees, whether we should be increasing our application fees to the extent that the mailing fees, if we're eating those fees, so the town isn't losing money, in terms of doing it. It's only a $95 application fee. A lot of the cities and towns that I'm dealing with are well over $200.
Well, sounds like it's okay. What's going on in that town? I mean, with hiring a new planning director, I'm a little concerned, with no town manager, no planning director. I mean, are the town departments all sort of operating on their own autonomous basis, or what's going on?
We
I
still
have not
have a
heard
town
anything.
manager.
Yeah.
We show the town manager, I understand.
Okay, so
hasn't-
she hasn't left yet. She's
No.
she's
Yeah,
gonna.
she's
stay
still
on.
acting, Dan. Right.
Yeah, she's acting until they get I think,
Till they find
a
a
replacement.
replacement. Yes.
Okay, all right. All right.
And the other board, there's the council that still is involved, it's taking care of all the day-to-day things that need to be done. So,
Right. No, I just wanted to know whether we would want to recommend any increase in our application fee. That would be the only question.
I'm sorry,
I
I
would
didn't mean
have.
to bring that up the way that I did. It's just that it's, I'm new to the town. It's kind of, what's been going on is kind of been a.
this
been-
is the first time, Dan, this has happened since I've been on the board for, I don't know how many years now. So
well, that's
this is different, but with Mary having the issue she had, so that kind of made it difficult. And then with Bethany wanting to do what she wanted to do,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, because the issue that I just had is I want to just make sure the $95 is covering our administrative costs. It makes,
Yeah,
you know
whether
what I
we
mean, it
want
has
to
to
raise
make
it.
copies, their time in getting the copies together, collating the packages, getting the packages out.
My vote would be that we try to hold our prices wherever we
Okay.
can for as long
Okay.
as we can, not burden people and nickel and dime them with added fees unless it's somehow a big problem for the town,
I
which
agree
doesn't
with
sound
you.
like it is.
No, I don't think it is. That's why but I just wanted to ask because I don't want to put the town into a negative situation. I mean, we haven't raised our fees since I've been on the board.
Yeah.
And that's going back 30 years.
Well, Starbucks, I think it's Costco hasn't raised the price on its chicken either in about 25 years. Sometimes you can make it work.
So that was my only concern, but I was okay with the report. And that was the only question I had of the board members, whether we should be considering an increasing the application fee. I mean, we're
Let's
well
wait till
behind
after
most of the
COVID,
others.
Mark. Let's wait till after COVID to deal with it.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with it. But I just am in concern because East Long Meadow is probably the cheapest in the area right now.
Before you
Well,
guys
that's
make
good.
Yeah.
close,
Go ahead, Nina.
are you guys okay with moving the meeting to March 7th and canceling the one on Valentine's Day?
Yeah,
Sure.
just get permission from are we still within the 65 days?
Yeah, the
At
March
March
7th is
7th?
the last day before.
Is the last day.
60
Okay, so it would be on March 7th would be fine with me. And my other concern would be to see if the petitioner, if for some reason we can't vote on March 7th, consents to the because we only have 100 days on a variance to act.
Mhm.
Do
from
we
when
have
there's-
something on the docket? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a variance, dimensional variance application.
All right. You haven't sent us anything on that yet, right?
No, not yet.
No, I was waiting until.
Other than the message to find out whether we wanted to do it on Valentine's Day.
Right. At the
And I
other
sure
day.
didn't want to get anybody in trouble with their significant other by saying Beg Lane decided to have a ZBA hearing. Too bad we can't go out tonight, dear.
Yeah.
And my wife wouldn't be real happy with me, but with
Well,
COVID, we're not doing much anyways.
In that connection, I don't want to leave this meeting without acknowledging that at the last meeting, at the end of the meeting, I had a faux pas here in my office where my family members were giving me a hard time about the length of the meeting. And for a second there, I forgot I was on a camera and I raised my middle finger, and that was apparently recorded and memorialized forever in the archives of the town and brought to my attention by the town manager.
Mary got you good though, didn't she?
Well, she just wanted to make sure that, if somebody complained about it, that I knew what they would be complaining
Wait
about.
till you run for office, Dan. That picture is going to be all over the world.
Yeah, that's why I only seek appointed positions for that very reason. But that's not I just wanted to clear the air on that. That was, I apologize.
No problem. We knew that.
So I just wanted to do a motion to adopt the annual report that was submitted to submit to
So
the
moved.
town.
So moved.
Second, all in favor,
Second.
raise your
Yep.
hand. Everybody's approved. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
The only-
guys. Sorry to hold
Wanna
you up so
close the hearing?
long.
We all set?
We're all set. I'll close the public
Motion-
meeting.
You gotta make a motion.
Motion to
adjourn and
close the
everybody's
public
gotta vote.
meeting.
Yeah, we got to make a motion to adjourn. We've got to make sure that we adjourn these meetings on tape. I've been told that we need to do that.
Yeah.
So let's
Yes.
make sure, we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion
I
adjourned by
second.
Dan, second by Francis.
I
All in
second.
favor,
Yeah.
raise your hand.
Aye.
Dan-
Notice unanimous. We'll see
Dan,
you all on March 7th. And enjoy your Valentine's Day and stay COVID-free if you can.
You too. Be
Sounds
well,
good.
everybody.
Be able
Same,
to, everybody
everybody.
be well. Thanks, guys.
Take it easy.
Peace.
Yep.